The rain pounded the streets of Brooklyn like it was trying to drown my heart. I was 23, alone in my shoebox apartment, staring at a half-eaten cupcake. The candle still unlit because what was the point of wishing when you felt invisible? Then came the knock 3 sharp raps that jolted me from my pity party. It was Ethan, soaked to the bone, his green eyes glinting under the hallway light. My best friend since high school. The guy who'd always been there through my coming out. My first heartbreak. My everything stood dripping on my doorstep, clutching a small, poorly wrapped box. "Happy birthday, Caleb," he said, his voice rough, like he'd run through the storm just to get here. I laughed, pulling him inside. "You look like a drowned rat, man." But my chest tightened. Ethan wasn't just my friend, was the guy I'd loved in secret for years. The straight guy who'd never see me the way I saw him. Or so I thought. We sat on my creaky couch, the city's hum filtering through the window. Ethan handed me the box, his fingers brushing mine, lingering a second too long. "Open it," he urged, his usual confidence replaced by something shaky, almost fragile. Inside was a leather journal, the kind I'd always wanted, with my initials embossed on the cover. My throat closed up. "Ethan, this is too much." "No, it's nothing," he said, but his eyes didn't meet mine. He was nervous. Ethan, the guy who once faced down a bully twice his size for me, was nervous. I didn't know why, but it made my pulse race. We talked, laughed, shared the cupcake, but the air felt charged, like the storm outside had followed us in. Then he leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. "Caleb, I need to tell you something." His voice was barely a whisper, and my heart stopped. I'd spent years burying my feelings, convincing myself he'd never crossed that line. But the way he looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time made me wonder if I'd been wrong all along. The journal sat between us, a silent witness to the moment everything changed. Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for mine, and I froze, caught between hope and fear. "I've been thinking about this for a while," he said, his words heavy with meaning I couldn't yet grasp. "About you. About us." I wanted to laugh it off, to pretend he was joking, but his eyes held no trace of humor. They were raw, searching, like he was asking me to meet him halfway. My apartment, my safe little world, suddenly felt too small to contain whatever was happening. I'd spent years building walls around my heart, but Ethan was standing there, ready to tear them down. "Ethan, you're straight," I managed, my voice cracking. "You've got a girlfriend. You don't do this." He winced, like I'd struck him. "I know what I am. Or, I thought I did." He ran a hand through his wet hair, frustration etching his face. "But it's your birthday, and I couldn't stop thinking about how I wanted to be here. With you. Not her." My mind spun. Ethan had been dating Sarah for a year, the kind of girl who fit perfectly into his world, cheerful, confident, everything I wasn't. I was the artsy kid, the one who'd always been too loud about my truth, too queer for the small town we grew up in. Yet here he was, unraveling everything I thought I knew about him. "I don't know what this means," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I know I can't keep pretending I don't feel something." I stared at him, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle, but the storm in my chest was just beginning. I wanted to ask a million questions. Why now? What changed? What happens next? But all I could do was hold the journal tighter, like it could anchor me to reality. Ethan's hand found mine again. And this time, he didn't let go. "Caleb," he said, his voice steadier now. "I want to figure this out. With you." I didn't know if I was ready for what came next. But for the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as the gay best friend. Not as the sidekick in Ethan's story. But as someone who mattered. Someone he might love. The night stretched on. And we talked until the city quieted. Ethan didn't have all the answers. And neither did I. But that journalist's gift felt like a promise. A promise that maybe, just maybe, we could write a new story together. The days after my birthday felt like walking on a tightrope. Ethan's words, "I want to figure this out. With you," echoed in my head. But doubt crept in like a thief. Was this real? Or was I just the experiment of a guy questioning his straightness? I saw Ethan less that week. Not because I wanted to, but because life pulled us in different directions. He had his job at the record store, and I was buried in freelance graphic design gigs, trying to make rent. But every text from him, simple things like, "You free tonight?" or "Heard a song you'd love," felt like a lifeline, tethering me to that moment on my couch. On Saturday, we met at our usual spot, a dive bar in Williamsburg with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played 90s hits. Ethan was already there, nursing a beer, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows. He looked different, somehow less like the carefree guy I'd known forever. More like someone carrying a secret too big to hold. "You okay?" I asked, sliding into the booth across from him. He nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just thinking a lot." "About?" I pressed, my stomach nodding. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "About you. About what I said." He paused, glancing around like someone might overhear. "I broke up with Sarah." The words hit like a punch. "What? When?" "Yesterday." He shrugged, but his hands fidgeted with the beer bottle. "It wasn't fair to her. I couldn't stop thinking about you, Caleb. It's been messing with my head for months." My heart did a somersault, but fear kept me grounded. "Ethan, you can't just upend your life like that. Not for me." "Why not?" His voice was sharp, almost defiant. "You think I don't know what I'm doing? I've spent my whole life doing what everyone expects: good grades, football, the perfect girlfriend. But you make me feel like I can be someone else. Someone real." I wanted to believe him, but years of hiding my feelings had taught me caution. What if you wake up tomorrow and regret this? I'm not some phase. Ethan, I can't be. He flinched, but his gaze didn't waver. "I know. And I'm not asking you to be my guinea pig. I need time to figure out what this is. Don't you?" I didn't answer right away. The jukebox kicked on, blaring Nirvana, and I let the noise fill the silence. Ethan was asking for a chance, but letting him in meant risking everything: our friendship, my heart, the fragile world we'd built together. "Let's take it slow," I finally said. "No pressure, no labels. Just us." His relief was palpable, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Deal." We spent the night talking, not about the big stuff, but the little things: movies, music, the time we snuck into a concert in high school and almost got arrested. It felt normal, but not. Every glance, every accidental touch, carried weight. When we left the bar, the city was alive with lights, and Ethan walked closer to me than he ever had before. Back at my apartment, he lingered at the door. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked, his voice soft but urgent. Yeah, I said, my chest tight. Tomorrow. As he left, I pulled out the journal he'd given me. I hadn't written in it yet, too afraid to mark the moment. But now, I opened it, my pen hovering over the blank page. I wrote one word, hope. The next week was a blur of stolen moments. Coffee runs turned into hour-long talks. Movie nights ended with us sitting too close, our knees brushing. Ethan was trying. I could tell. But he was also scared. I saw it in the way he'd pull back sometimes, like he was wrestling with himself. One night, we ended up at Coney Island, the boardwalk quiet in the off-season. The air was crisp, the ocean a dark murmur. We sat on a bench, sharing a bag of popcorn, when Ethan turned to me, his face half lit by a street lamp. I've never felt like this before, he said. Not with anyone. My breath caught. Like what? Like I'm waking up. His voice was raw, and he looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. Like you're the only thing that makes sense. I wanted to kiss him right there, but fear held me back. Instead, I took his hand, and he didn't pull away. We sat there, the world fading around us. Two guys on a boardwalk, trying to find their way to each other. The boardwalk moment stayed with me, a quiet promise etched into my bones. But life doesn't pause for revelations. And Ethan and I were still navigating this uncharted space between friendship and something more. I wanted to trust it, but doubt was a shadow I couldn't shake. Work kept me busy, but Ethan found ways to slip into my days. A text with a dumb meme. A coffee left on my desk when he stopped by my freelance gigs co-working space. Each gesture felt like a step closer, but also a reminder of how fragile this was. He was still figuring himself out, and I was terrified of becoming collateral damage. One evening, we ended up at a small art gallery in Bushwick, a favor for a friend whose paintings were on display. The room buzzed with hipsters and cheap wine, but Ethan seemed out of place, his hands stuffed in his pockets. This stuff's cool, he said, nodding at a canvas splattered with neon colors. You ever think about showing your work? I laughed, sipping my wine. My doodles? Nah, I'm not that brave. You should be, he said, his eyes serious. You're good, Caleb. Really good. His words hit harder than they should have. I'd spent years hiding my art, my feelings, my truth, afraid of being too much. Ethan saw through that. Always had. But now, his attention felt different, dangerous, like it could unravel me completely. We wandered to a quieter corner of the gallery, away from the crowd. Ethan leaned against the wall, his shoulder brushing mine. I told my sister about us, he said suddenly. I froze, my plastic cup nearly slipping from my hand. Us? What did you say? He shrugged, but his jaw was tight. Just that I'm figuring things out. That you're important to me. My heart raced. Ethan's sister, Mia, was his confidant, the one person he trusted completely. If he was telling her about me, this wasn't just a whim. And what did she say? He smiled faintly. She said I'm an idiot for taking so long to see it. I laughed, but it came out shaky. She's not wrong. The gallery lights dimmed, signaling closing time, and we stepped into the cool night air. Brooklyn was alive, music spilling from bars, but all I could hear was Ethan's breathing beside me. Caleb, he said, stopping under a streetlight. I'm scared. Not of you, but of messing this up. I swallowed hard. Me too. He stepped closer, his hand brushing my arm. But I don't want to stop. My chest ached with how much I wanted this. Wanted him. But the fear was still there, whispering that this could end in heartbreak. Ethan, if we do this, it's not just about you figuring yourself out. It's about me too. I've been hurt before. His face softened, and he nodded. I know. I don't want to hurt you. I want to try. We walked back to my place in silence, the weight of his words settling between us. At my door, he hesitated, then pulled me into a hug. It wasn't like the bro hugs we'd shared for years. This one lingered. His arms tight around me, his breath warm against my neck. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered. I wanted to believe him, but I'd learned the hard way that promises could break. Still, I let myself lean into him, just for a moment, letting hope win. The next day, I opened the journal again. I'd been writing in it more. Small thoughts, sketches, fragments of this thing growing between us. I drew Ethan's face, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way his hair fell over his forehead. It felt like claiming a piece of him, even if I wasn't sure I could keep him. A week later, Ethan invited me to his place for dinner. He lived in a cramped loft in Greenpoint, all exposed brick and vinyl records stacked everywhere. He'd cooked badly, but it was sweet burnt pasta and a salad that was mostly just lettuce. We laughed over it, the tension easing. After dinner, we sat on his couch, a record spinning softly in the background. Ethan was quieter than usual, his knee bouncing. I've been reading up, he said finally. About being bi, I guess. Or whatever this is. My heart skipped. And it's a lot, he admitted. But it feels right. Like I'm finally being honest with myself. I reached for his hand, and he laced his fingers through mine. You don't have to have it all figured out, I said. Just be honest with me. He nodded, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. I will. That night, we stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing. When I left, he walked me to the door, his hand lingering on my arm. Caleb, he said, his voice soft. Thank you for giving me a chance. I smiled, my heart full. Thank you for taking one. The weeks that followed were a dance of closeness and caution. Ethan and I were building something, but it was fragile, like a house of cards waiting for a breeze. Every moment with him felt electric, but the world outside our bubble wasn't as kind. We started spending more time together, not just as friends, but as something undefined, something that made my heart race and my head spin. A late-night diner run turned into us sharing fries and stealing glances. A walk through Central Park ended with us sitting on a bench, his arm around my shoulders, my head resting against him. It was new, terrifying, and beautiful. But reality has a way of crashing in. Ethan's parents were coming to visit from our hometown in upstate New York, and he hadn't told them about us. They're old school, he said one night, his voice tight as we sat on my fire escape, the city sprawling below us. They wouldn't get it. I nodded, but it stung. I'd come out to my family years ago, and while it wasn't easy, I'd fought for my truth. Ethan was still hiding, and I didn't know how long I could wait for him to catch up. You don't have to tell them yet, I said, trying to sound supportive. But you'll have to someday. He looked at me, his eyes heavy with guilt. I know. I'm just not ready. I wanted to push, to ask why, but I didn't. Instead, I squeezed his hand, hoping it was enough. The visit from his parents was tense. Ethan invited me to dinner with them at a fancy restaurant in Manhattan, but I felt like an outsider. His mom kept talking about Sarah, how lovely she was, how they'd hoped for grandkids soon. Ethan's jaw tightened with every word, but he didn't correct her. I sat there, smiling politely, my heart sinking. After dinner, we walked back to my place in silence. When we reached my door, Ethan finally spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have said something." "It's okay," I lied, but my chest ached. "You're not ready. I get it." He grabbed my hand, pulling me closer. "It's not okay. I hate that I made you feel like you don't matter. You do. Caleb. You matter more than anything." His words were a bandage, but the wound was still raw. I nodded, letting him pull me into a hug. But doubt gnawed at me. What if he never came out? What if I was just a secret he'd keep forever? The next day, Ethan showed up at my apartment with coffee and an apology. "I'm going to tell them," he said, his voice firm. "Not today, but soon. I promise." I wanted to believe him, but promises were starting to feel like glass beautiful but breakable. Still, I nodded, and we spent the day together, trying to reclaim the ease we'd had before. We ended up at a small bookstore, browsing shelves and laughing over cheesy romance novels. That night, back at my place, Ethan was quieter than usual. We were on the couch, a movie playing in the background, when he turned to me. "Caleb, I need you to know something." My heart skipped. "What?" "I'm falling for you," he said, his voice steady but vulnerable. "And it scares the hell out of me, but I don't want to stop." I stared at him, my breath caught in my throat. I'd loved him for years, but hearing him say it, seeing the truth in his eyes, made it real in a way I hadn't expected. "Ethan," I whispered, "I'm falling for you too." He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. And for a moment, the world was just us. No parents, no expectations, no fear. Just two people finding each other in the dark. But the dark was still there. The next week, Ethan's dad called, asking why he'd broken up with Sarah. Ethan dodged the question, but I could see the strain in his eyes. He was caught between two worlds, his family's and mine, and I didn't know which one he'd choose. I wrote in the journal that night, pouring out my fears, my hopes, my love. The pages were filling up, a record of this thing we were building, but also a reminder of how easily it could fall apart. When Ethan came over the next day, he looked exhausted. "My dad keeps pushing," he said, pacing my tiny living room. "He thinks I'm throwing my life away." "For me?" I asked, my voice quiet. He stopped, turning to me. "No. For me. For being honest with myself." I wanted to hug him, to tell him it would be okay, but I wasn't sure it would. Instead, I took his hand and led him to the couch. "We'll figure it out," I said. "Together." He nodded, but his eyes were distant. I knew then that this wasn't just about use, it was about Ethan finding the courage to be himself, no matter what it cost. The weight of Ethan's struggle settled over us like a fog. He was trying to be honest with himself, but every step forward seemed to pull him back. I wanted to be his anchor, but I was starting to feel like I was drowning too. We kept our routine: coffee, walks, late-night talks, but there was a tension now. A question neither of us could answer. What happens next? Ethan was still hiding from his family, and I was hiding from the fear that he might never be ready. One chilly October evening, we went to a rooftop party in Williamsburg, hosted by a mutual friend. The city skyline sparkled, and the air was thick with laughter and music. Ethan seemed lighter, his arm brushing mine as we leaned against the railing, looking out at the lights. "You ever think about leaving New York?" he asked, his voice soft. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But this city, it's where I found myself. Where I found you." He smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, Caleb. For us." My heart sank, but I kept my voice steady. "You don't have to be strong. Just be you." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "I'm trying." The party went on, but we stayed in our own world, talking about everything except the thing that mattered most. When the crowd thinned, Ethan took my hand and led me to a quieter corner of the rooftop. "I told Mia everything," he said, "about how I feel about you. About being bi." My breath caught. "And?" She hugged me and said she's proud of me. His voice cracked, and he looked away, blinking hard. "She's the first person who didn't make me feel like I'm doing something wrong." I squeezed his hand, my chest tight with pride and pain. "You're not doing anything wrong, Ethan. You're just being you." He nodded, but his eyes were still distant. "I want to tell my parents, but I'm scared they'll cut me off. Not just money, but everything." I understood. Ethan's family was close-knit, traditional, the kind that expected him to follow a certain path. Coming out could mean losing them, and I knew how much that weighed on him. "You don't have to do it alone," I said. "I'm here." He looked at me, his expression softening. "I know. That's why I'm still trying." We stayed on the rooftop until the air grew too cold, then walked back to my place, our hands brushing but not quite holding. At my door, Ethan hesitated, then pulled me into a hug. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "You do," I said, my voice fierce. "And I'm not going anywhere." But the next day, doubt crept back in. Ethan canceled our plans, saying he needed space. I tried not to panic, but my mind spiraled. Was he pulling away? Had I pushed him too far? I opened the journal, staring at the pages filled with my hopes and fears. I wrote, "What if he chooses them over me?" A few days later, Ethan showed up at my apartment, his eyes red-rimmed. "I told my dad," he said, his voice hollow. "It didn't go well." My heart sank. "What happened?" He said, "I'm confused, that I need to fix this." He laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair. "He thinks it's a phase." I pulled him inside, sitting him on the couch. "You're not confused, Ethan. You're figuring out who you are. That's not a phase, it's courage." He looked at me, his eyes glistening. "What if he's right? What if I'm not enough for you?" I took his face in my hands, forcing him to meet my gaze. "You are enough. More than enough." For the first time, Ethan didn't pull away. He leaned in, his lips brushing mine, tentative and soft. It was his first kiss, not just with me, but with any guy, and it was everything. Gentle, nervous, real. My heart pounded as I kissed him back, careful not to push too hard, letting him lead. When we pulled apart, his eyes were wide, like he'd just discovered something new about himself. That was, he trailed off, a small smile breaking through. That was good. I laughed, my chest light for the first time in days. Yeah, it was. We sat there, hands intertwined, the journal open on the coffee table. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but in that moment, Ethan had chosen me, and that was enough. That kiss changed everything. It was a line crossed, a door opened, and neither of us could go back. But the world outside my apartment didn't stop turning, and Ethan's family was still a storm waiting to break. We spent the next few days in a bubble, stealing moments between work and life. A quick coffee date where Ethan's knee pressed against mine under the table. A late-night walk where he grabbed my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. Every touch felt like a victory, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on borrowed time. Ethan's dad called again, demanding answers. He wants me to come home for Thanksgiving, Ethan told me, his voice tight as we sat in a diner, the neon sign buzzing above us. He thinks he can talk me out of this. Out of what? I asked, my heart pounding. Out of being bi. Out of me. Ethan's eyes dropped to his coffee. Both. Maybe. I swallowed the lump in my throat. What do you want, Ethan? He looked up, his gaze steady. You. I want you. My chest ached with relief, but fear lingered. Then tell him that. Tell him you're not confused. That this is who you are. He nodded, but I could see the weight on his shoulders. Going home meant facing his family's expectations head on, and I wasn't sure he was ready. Thanksgiving was a week away, and Ethan decided to go. I need to do this, he said, packing a bag in his loft. I need to tell them the truth. I helped him fold his clothes, my hand shaking. I'm proud of you, I said, meaning it. But what if they don't accept you? He paused, his hands stilling on a sweater. Then I'll have to figure out how to live with that. I wanted to go with him, to stand by his side, but he asked me to stay. This is something I need to do alone, he said, and I respected that, even if it hurt. The night before he left, we stayed up late, tangled on my couch, the journal open between us. I'd been sketching him again, capturing the way his jaw tightened when he was nervous, the way his eyes softened when he looked at me. You're gonna be okay, I whispered, my lips brushing his temple. I hope so, he said, his voice barely audible. He left the next morning, and my apartment felt emptier than ever. I tried to keep busy, throwing myself into work, but every text from Ethan felt like a lifeline. Landed in Albany. Miss you already. Dinner with Mom and Dad tonight. Wish me luck. The call came 2 days later. Ethan's voice was raw, like he'd been crying. It was bad. Caleb. Really bad. My heart sank. What happened? They told me I'm not their son anymore. Not if I'm like this. I gripped the phone, my chest tight. Ethan, I'm so sorry. Where are you? At Mia's. She's letting me stay with her. I'm coming up there, I said, already grabbing my keys. No, he said quickly. I need to process this. I needed to hear your voice. I hated being so far away, but I stayed on the phone with him for hours, listening as he poured out his pain, his anger, his fear. I don't know who I am without them, he admitted. You're still you, I said fiercely. You're the guy who makes me laugh, who shows up with coffee, who kissed me like it was the only thing that mattered. They don't get to take that away. He was quiet for a long time, then whispered, "I love you, Caleb." My heart stopped. I love you too. When he came back to New York, he was different, quieter, but also stronger. Like he'd shed a weight he'd been carrying too long. We spent the day together, wandering the city, not saying much, but feeling everything. At sunset, we ended up at the Brooklyn Bridge, the lights reflecting on the water. "I'm done hiding," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I'm done letting them define me." I took his hand, my heart full. "Then let's write our own story." He smiled, pulling me close, and kissed me right there, in front of the world. It wasn't his first kiss anymore, but it felt like a beginning. Ethan's decision to stop hiding was a turning point, but it didn't erase the pain. His family's rejection left scars, and I could see them in the way he'd go quiet sometimes, staring out my window like he was searching for answers in the city lights. But he was trying, and so was I. We started building a life together, piece by piece. Small things, like cooking dinner in his loft, laughing when the pasta boiled over. Bigger things, like meeting his sister Mia for coffee, where she hugged me and said, "You're good for him." But the world wasn't always kind. One night, we were walking home from a bar, holding hands, when a group of guys shouted slurs from across the street. Ethan's grip tightened, his jaw set, but I could feel his fear. I pulled him closer, whispering, "Ignore them. They don't matter." He nodded, but the incident lingered. Later, in my apartment, he paced, his hands clenched. "I hate that this is part of it," he said. "That just being with you means dealing with that." "It's not fair," I agreed, my voice soft. "But it's worth it. You're worth it." He stopped pacing, looking at me like I was his anchor. "How do you do it? How do you deal with this every day?" I shrugged, trying to keep it light. "You get used to it, and you find people who make it easier." He crossed the room in 2 steps, pulling me into a kiss that was fierce and desperate. "You make it easier," he said against my lips. We were learning each other, finding the rhythm of this new thing we were. Ethan started coming to queer events with med-rag shows, book readings, a pride march in the village. He was nervous at first, but he listened, asked questions, and held my hand like he was proud to be there. One night, at a queer poetry slam, Ethan surprised me. He'd been quiet all evening, but when the mic opened up, he stood, his hands shaking as he read a poem he'd written. It was raw, about finding himself, about loving someone he never expected to love. The room erupted in applause, and I couldn't stop the tears in my eyes. "You didn't tell me you were a poet," I said later, as we walked home. He laughed, his cheeks red. "I'm not. I just needed to say it." I kissed him under a streetlight, my heart so full it hurt. "I'm proud of you." But not every moment was perfect. Ethan's dad sent him a letter, asking him to come to his senses. Ethan didn't respond, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. I wanted to fix it, to make his family see him the way I did. But all I could do was be there. We started planning for the future, tentative at first. A trip to Provincetown next summer. Maybe moving in together someday. It felt like a dream, but also like something we could make real. One evening, as we sat on my fire escape, the journal opened between us. Ethan took the pen and started writing. "What's that?" I asked, leaning over. He smiled, handing me the journal. He'd written, To Caleb, the guy who showed me what love looks like. I blinked back tears, pulling him close. You're gonna make me cry. You know that. Good, he said, kissing my forehead. You deserve to know. The journal was nearly full now. Pages crowded with sketches, thoughts, and moments we'd shared. It was our story, messy and real, and I loved every word of it. But life doesn't let you rest. A week later, Ethan got a call from his mom. She wanted to meet, to talk. He was nervous, but hopeful, and I couldn't help but hope too. Maybe she'd see him, really see him, and understand. The day of the meeting, Ethan was a wreck, pacing my apartment. What if she hates me? He asked, his voice small. She won't, I said, taking his hands. And if she does, you've got me. You've got Mia. You've got a family here. He nodded, pulling me into a hug. I love you, he said, and it was the easiest thing in the world to say it back. The meeting with Ethan's mom was a step into the unknown. He went alone, but I waited at a nearby cafe. My phone clutched like a lifeline. When he texted me to come meet him, my heart was in my throat. I found him in a small park, sitting on a bench with his mom. She was older than I'd pictured, her face lined with worry but soft with something else, regret. Maybe. Ethan stood when he saw me, his eyes bright but tired. Caleb, this is my mom, Linda. She stood too, offering a hesitant smile. It's nice to meet you, she said, her voice careful but kind. We sat, and she spoke first. Ethan told me everything. About you. About himself. She paused, her hands twisting in her lap. I didn't handle it well at first, but I don't want to lose my son. Ethan's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. I don't want to lose you either, he said, his voice steady. But I'm not hiding who I am anymore. Linda nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm trying to understand. It's new for me. But I love you, Ethan. And I want to know Caleb too. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. We talked for hours. Awkward at first, but slowly finding common ground. She asked about my art, my life, and I saw glimpses of the warmth Ethan had grown up with. When we parted, she hugged us both, and Ethan's shoulders finally relaxed. On the way home, he was quiet, but his hand never left mine. Thank you, he said finally, for being patient, for believing in me. I always will, I said, meaning every word. That night, we sat on my couch. The journal opened between us. It was full now, every page a piece of our journey. Ethan took it, flipping to the last blank page. What do we do now? He asked, half smiling. Start a new one, I said, pulling out a fresh journal from my desk. He laughed, pulling me close. You're such a sap, says the guy who wrote me a poem. I teased, kissing him. Our life wasn't perfect. Ethan's dad was still distant, and the world still threw challenges our way. But we faced them together, building something stronger than fear. Ethan started volunteering at a local LGBTQ center, finding a community that embraced him. I showed my art at a small gallery, Ethan cheering louder than anyone. One night, a year after my birthday, we stood on the Brooklyn Bridge again, the city glowing around us. Ethan pulled out a small box, not unlike the one he'd given me before. Inside was a key to his loft. Move in with me, he said, his voice steady but nervous. I want to build a life with you. My heart soared. Yes, I said, pulling him into a kiss that felt like a promise. The journal, the first gift he'd given me, sat on our coffee table now, a reminder of where we started. It wasn't just a gift, it was the beginning of us. Ethan's first kiss had been a leap, but every step since had been a choice. A choice to love, to fight, to be true. And as we stood there, the city alive around us, I knew we'd keep choosing each other, no matter what came next.